It's good to be with you all this evening on the feast of Saint Pope Kyrollos VI. And as the fathers were meeting this morning, we figured it would be important for us to really focus on the life of Pope Kyrollos, because this is not a saint who is distant. He's not a saint who's far away. He's not a saint who lived in a completely different era than we've lived in. He's a modern-day saint. And as I was, skimming through this amazing biography of the life of Pope Kyrollos, I stopped at one chapter, and it really sort of struck a chord with me. And it's a very fancy sort of chapter. The name, it says 3 bishops and a monk, a kenotic ecclesiology. Actually, it's funny that Abuna Paul took that verse from Philippians, because we didn't plan this, so I know that it's a God thing. Because the self-emptying, kenosis is self-emptying. That God emptied himself and took on the form of a bondservant, the form of a slave. And he did all this in order to teach us the way that we ought to serve. And as I was looking at the life of Pope Kyrollos, this saint's ministry was 12 years. Like his papacy, where he was in a place of power, was 12 years. And this man, the power of his 12 years has influenced, 70 years now of the church? And how much of a revival the church has had as a result of his short-lived papacy? I kept thinking to myself, as I'm reading this book, what did this man do? What was his ministry? What was his vision? Did he have core values? Did he have a mission statement? Did he have anything fancy that he was trying to sort of create? His ministry was prayer. His vision for how to change the church was prayer. And as we go through this, and I promise you this is going to be very short, as we go through the life of Pope Kyrollos, just with a few stories, that I'll just take some of these out from the book, I think it'll give us a little bit of a glimpse of maybe what I can confess that I'm missing. And maybe y'all can relate to me. I can confess that when I look at the life of Pope Kyrollos, it's like, when you stand in the face of somebody and you see your own flaws when you're with the presence of somebody holy. When you sit in the presence of Pope Kyrollos, you realize your shortcomings. And what my prayer is for us this evening is not that we can look at Pope Kyrollos as this really amazing character, but what can we take from him? And how can he be a means of inspiration for this church? And how can he be a means of inspiration for how we do ministry? So I wanted to start off with this verse. It's from 2 Corinthians 3:18. And the verse says, "But we all with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as by the Spirit of the Lord." And when you look at this verse, actually, the being transformed, do you know what the word is? Does anyone know what the original word is? Metamorphosis, or metamorph. In Greek, it's metamorph. Metamorphosis, a caterpillar? And what a caterpillar is this kind of a pretty ugly creature, right? It's slimy. You see a caterpillar, nobody wants to be around it. But in that caterpillar is the potential to be a butterfly. In that caterpillar is this really ugly sort of creature that's kind of slimy on the ground. But when it reaches its potential, it can be a butterfly. And this is the way Pope Kyrollos viewed the church. This is the way Pope Kyrollos viewed his disciples. He viewed his disciples with the potential that they had. And as I was reading through parts of his life today, I couldn't help but take some quotes from the book from the Silent Patriarch. So I will just read some of these quotes for you, And it says, what if, for instance, reform could move through ascetic influence, through a revolution of hearts from individual to individual, something of a discipleship of reform? What if a handful of disciples went on to become reformers, having first undertaken their own personal reform? What if they too reached out within their ascetic influence? And what if beneath them, as in the case of modern Egypt, there was a network of discipleship forged by a unique Sunday school system, a unique what? Sunday school system that had the capacity to extend that sphere of ascetic influence well beyond their individual reach. What is this quote saying? Pope Kyrollos started with himself. His own personal encounter with God, his own personal metamorphosis, his own personal divine experience shaped the lives of all the amazing disciples that Abuna was just saying earlier, what the impact of Pope Kyrollos was and who many of the disciples, and we'll get into that in a second. But his own personal asceticism, his own personal encounter with God changed the lives of many others. And as I was reflecting today about many people that discipled me, I was thinking, do I remember their sermons? To be honest, no. Do I remember, the eloquent stories that they told? No. But I remember how they looked up to God when they prayed. I remember how, when they stood at liturgy, they offered up liturgy as though they were offering up the world. I remember when they would kneel down next to me and they would be crying for the sake of the church. Those are the people that left the greatest mark on my life. Truly. Wasn't their words, wasn't their speech, wasn't the cool things, it was their holiness. And what would happen if our transformation, our own reform, bled into the church? I think the problem is many of us think that if we come up with new, innovative, cool ideas to serve the next generation, like we're going to all of a sudden have changes in the church, like we're going to see saints come up. I don't think kids are looking for cool servants. I don't think kids are looking for cool stories. I think they're looking for people that actually have encountered the living God, the resurrected Christ, and have experienced their own resurrection. And I confess to you that as I was reading today, I kept saying to myself, Lord, how far am I from this? Like, how far am I from the reality of the life of Pope Kyrollos? It's a great story from the book that I'll read to you in 1 second. But I think it really speaks volumes to the way Pope Kyrollos served and how he sort of saw the potential in each person. In 1968, there was a much-loved priest whom Kyrollos relocated to the Patriarchate for 6 months to serve closely with him. The whole parish, unaware of the reason, rose into something of a revolution. Sunday school youth groups, the church committee, all of them asking, how could you remove this beloved priest? The people began cursing. Buses arrived at the Patriarchate overflowing with people. We want our priest back, they screamed. Then after 6 months, Kyrollos moved him to another, far more thriving parish. But once more the revolution arose, cursing and criticism began once more, and yet Pope Kyrollos remained silent. This went on for some time until an old friend from Kyrollos' time in Old Cairo rebuked him, saying, "You are causing trouble. Everyone is disturbed and angry. Just return the priest to his parish." Do we need more troubles? Kyrollos calmly confided to his dear friend, "If you only knew the reality. This priest is not worthy of priesthood." But listen to this. At this point, he's speaking to Abuna Rafael, who I had the blessing of meeting when I was in Simina's monastery. Father Raphael became moved with emotion, not worthy of priesthood, and yet he stayed silent for 6 months, being mocked, criticized, sworn at, and not once did Kyrollos open his mouth to explain. Not merely a mistake, the man was not worthy of priesthood at all, yet he puts him in his bosom in the Patriarchate and returns him healed. This is Pope Kyrollos. He puts him in his bosom, and after 6 months, he's healed. The corrupt priest, allegedly guilty of financial swindling, was very much a product of his time. He was deserving of punishment and public humiliation, even defrocking. But despite the personal cost of 6 months of criticism, Kyrollos loved him and healed him. I wonder what was happening for those 6 months. Like, I wish that I was in the inner court of like what those encounters were like. 6 months. What type of spiritual program was Pope Kyrollos doing? I don't think it was like a rehab program. I think he probably did his normal routine, wake up, pray liturgy, offer up the world. And how did this priest encounter the divine? Not through the words that Pope Kyrollos said, but what he saw. What he saw. The revolution happened through what he saw. And this is what Pope Kyrollos did when he saw the broken church that he inherited. Kyrollos took into himself a weeping and broken church as he did that corrupt and unworthy priest, and healed through his own personal ascetic reform at a precious personal cost. For this reason, the following accounts of his disciples, Bishop Samuel, Bishop Gregorius, Pope Shenouda, Abuna Met el-Miskin, will be intensely personal in tracing Kyrollos' ascetic influence, an influence that brought about one of the most profound transformations in the history of the church. Not through what he said, but through what they saw. Those 4 men, if you go through each of their autobiographies, incredible. Incredible. And when he saw them, when he met them, they actually weren't anything that special. Like, they were cool, impressive young kids, but he saw their potential. He saw them as those worms and saw that they could be the people that shaped the whole Coptic church. And the reason why, for example, Emba Samuel was the one who planted the seeds of the church in the diaspora. Like, the reason why we have the Coptic church, outside of Egypt, church in the diaspora, the church outside of Egypt. The reason why we have the church outside of Egypt, the reason why we're sitting in this room in Fairfax, Virginia right now, was because Bishop Samuel went out, he studied in America, and because of his encounter in America, he went back and planted the seed in the ears of Pope Kyrollos. Those people that were his disciples, he sent them out, and he actually brought them back to do what? To learn from them. The amazing thing about the ministry of Pope Kyrollos is he knew what his weaknesses were, and he surrounded himself with people that covered his shortcomings, people that could be trusted advisors to him. So why this asceticism? Why this ascetic life? I'll define asceticism in our context in terms of what asceticism, I had some dental work done today, I can't speak. What asceticism looks like in our context. But look what St. Athanasius says. He says, the aim of ascetic life is to free the soul from the bonds of the body and to purify it from all earthly passions so that it may be filled with the Holy Spirit and become united with God. The goal of asceticism, the goal of tightening the belt, the goal of fasting, the goal of praying, the goal of this whole season, all the liturgical life that we have, is to empty the passions. And what are the passions? If I am typically an angry person, this is the season in which I come to God and I say, Lord, I'm fasting and I need to be healed from my anger. So exchange my anger with your joy, with your peace. If I'm a type of person that constantly is talking, this is a season in which maybe I tighten my mouth a little bit and I stay silent. Every single one of our asceticisms is going to look different than the next because each of us have different passions, each of us have different struggles, each of us have different shortcomings. And the goal is not to just change the diet from eating a great McChicken to a Siami McChicken. Like, listen, the Siami McChicken is really good. It's not from McDonald's, but it's from Boca, you know? Like, the goal is not the vegan diet. That's part of it. And you'll hear me saying this from here to next year. The goal is that I discipline my body in order for me to not become disqualified. As St. Paul says, do you know that those who run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it. And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we for an imperishable crown. Therefore I run thus, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself become disqualified. Look at the theology of St. Paul. I'm not doing something that I'm not living. In fact, everything that I do is for my own salvation and my own journey with God first and foremost. And when I have ran with endurance and when I have disciplined myself, of course, what's going to naturally happen, it's going to pour over into others. In Egypt, one of the first lessons I learned was El Malien Biemli. You know what that means? The one who's filled, fills. The one who's empty will feel empty. And if in this season of our ministry we're feeling empty, it's probably because we're not filling. If we're feeling like we have nothing to give, it's probably as a result that we're not spending enough time in our own personal race. And listen, I confess first and foremost, becoming a priest has made my spiritual life that much more difficult. And you may say that's crazy, right? But when you are like nonstop text messages, it's hard to stay focused and stay disciplined and stay on course of what is the most important thing, which is my relationship first and foremost with the Lord. The days that I seek power from on high are the days that I have enough to pour into others. The days that I don't have anything are the days where I feel empty. The days where I feel like, oh, this is just too much. But when I'm filled, I fill. And I take that to heart. Abuna Paul said this earlier. The way of Christ is self-emptying. But the way of Christ is not just self-emptying. It's self-emptying, self-denying, and self-forgetting for the sake of being filled with love. Self-emptying is I give of myself, I deny myself, not for the sake of denying myself because it's just like a cool thing to do. Like I don't just like not fast because I want to be vegan, right? We're not hipsters in Brooklyn. Like we don't want to be, we don't want to be vegan for the sake of being vegan. We want to be vegan because we discipline our bodies in order for us to have loving union with God, have deeper intimacy and connection with Him, have deeper encounter with Him. Self-emptying, self-denying, and self-forgetting. What is self-forgetting? Is when Christ had every opportunity to send down a legion of angels to destroy those who were beating Him and persecuting Him. He never let that power overtake the goal and the mission that He had to save the entire world. That's why we say what do we say in the Holy Week hymn, Abuna? He showed us what great power was through weakness. Is that what he says? By strength, what? What is it, John? Who by weakness showed us what is greater than power. Thank you, John. Who by weakness showed us what is greater than power. The hymns of the church teach us the theology of Christ. His weakness was His power. His emptying, His self-forgetting was His power. I want us to see these 4 men that are on the screen. These 4 men who changed the landscape of the Coptic Church. And look at the ministries that God has entrusted each and every one of us. And think to ourselves, Lord, is there a Pope Shenouda sitting in my classroom? Is there an Abuna Metta? Is there a Samuel? Is there an Amba Gregorios? Are there potential saints in the children that we are ministering? And how will they become saints? Through me. Through me living a life of holiness and through them seeing the face of Christ upon mine. Through them not hearing the words that I say. Like, listen, 99% of you will not remember in 30 minutes what I said tonight. And that's why I don't believe in talks. Like, I just don't think that's you're not going to remember. 99% of you will not remember this talk. And it's fair, I didn't say anything special, right? But if I am repenting, if Abuna Paul is repenting, if Abuna Mark is repenting, if all of us are repenting as servants, as a church, we'll see a reformation happen in this church. We'll see changes in the hearts of the kids that we are serving. We'll see the brokenness in the households of those around us be healed, not through words, but through life. So what is your asceticism? Asceticism is an essential aspect of the spiritual life. What is your asceticism? What's your asceticism this fast? What's your asceticism? And again, only in your context can you describe. If you gossip a lot, maybe your asceticism is keeping the mouth shut. If you're the type of person that always has to give your opinion, maybe your asceticism this fast is not giving your opinion. If your struggle is maybe you are constantly, whenever you're hungry, you eat the closest thing you possibly can, maybe your discipline or your asceticism is to say, I'm going to wait 5 minutes before I eat. I'm going to teach myself how to have self-control. All of us within the context of what we and our spiritual fathers can help discover with us, we can find out what are our passions, what are our vices, in order to replace them during the season with virtue, with spiritual growth, to be transformed from glory to glory. That is the goal. The goal is not to go through another Lent and to say, oh, awesome, I fasted for 55 days, and this time I actually didn't eat cheese. Well done. Awesome. But I'm still doing the same exact thing that I did like last year. The same struggles, the same brokenness, the same sin. Please, 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 for the sake of our church and for the sake of the next generation, let's all of us look to the life of Pope Kyrollos and his legacy and see how he saw a world and a city and a church could be transformed through a life of prayer. All of our prayer lives are going to look different, but all of us need to pray. All of our levels of asceticism are going to look different, but we need to practice asceticism. It is in the whole journey of the Orthodox Church. Our youth are looking for people that are serious. They're looking for saints among us. Let us be inspired and be encouraged and be motivated that we are not becoming saints on our own. We are becoming saints through, what did Abuna Paul say during? We are becoming saints through an encounter with Christ, through what? The life of the church. The life of the church, by the way, Pope Kyrollos, his power was in the liturgy, as Abuna Paul was saying earlier. He didn't see liturgy as just something he did. It was his, the words that they say, it was his source of comfort. The liturgy to him was the place where he found, in the midst of the chaos, he was able to find a sense of calm in the midst of the storm. The liturgy is where we exchange all of our passions for his life. So maybe all during the rest of this season, we have 35 days left, I believe, of the fast. Huh? Almost over. It's almost over, Abuna is saying. It's almost over. Let's buckle a little bit tighter and let's offer more prayer, not for the sake of just praying, but for the sake of love, for the sake of the church and for the sake of the people that we serve. Because if we live a life of prayer, our kids will live a life of prayer. If we live a life of asceticism, they'll live a life of asceticism. If they see the saints amongst us, they will become saints. So I know that y'all have immense, immense capacity because God has given this church immense grace. So let us all seek him this season more and more because he is ready and willing to give every single one of us exactly what we need for this season in order to be a means of healing for the sake of this church and for the sake of the generations to come. Glory be to God forever. Amen.
All right, let's stand up and pray.